As is tradition, a new season of anime has started, and with that, of course, comes the best part of every season, the new openings. Bokurano is the title of the 11th opening from My Hero Academia, music by Eve, best known in anime for Jujutsu Kaisen's Kaikai Kitan and Chainsaw Man's fight song. Putting that Fortnite money to good use, I see. This video will be spoiler-free until the manga section at the very end. Timestamps are included in case you want to skip around a bit. We start out with some quick establishing shots of Deku in a worn-out version of his hero costume, though calling it a hero costume feels a little out of place with how beaten it looks. Working in tandem with the washed-out green tint used throughout the opening, the general feel of the whole thing is kind of somber and depressing. Much different feel to the anime so far. Contrasting with the darker green tint, we get flashes of the title in a color very similar to Deku's bright green one-for-all lightning. As for the costume itself, we can see along his arms that Deku is using gauntlets very similar to those that Melissa's shield gave to him in the Two Heroes movie. In case you don't remember, Melissa gave the gauntlets to Deku after noticing his power was too much for his body to handle. They were a support item that she designed to withstand the full power of All Might's punches up to 3 times before breaking, with Deku eventually using all 3 smashes before the movie's end. Panning up, we see both the damage his suit has taken and Gran Torino's yellow cape. Last we saw of him, he was being carried away to the hospital after being donated by Shigaraki during the war. Hopefully he's alright, but that doesn't seem like a great sign. We see a quick flash with his battered rabbit's hood covering half his face, something that we'll come back to later. Up next is a profile shot standing atop a building, looking out over a city covered in dust. Some quick shots of the top 3 heroes are cut in between. Not much to be said about these, except for the quick mention of the great shot of Hawks holding his Endeavor plushie. What there is much to say about, however, is Deku. We can again see his costume is very worn out, and he's wearing a large backpack, both looking absolutely awesome and somewhat sad. The final shot of this part has Deku in front of his mentor All Might before he turns away, presumably to get back to work. Now, manga readers should instantly be able to recognize many of the panels here, and if that's you, then stick around until the end for the Manga References section later in this video. But for now, next up, we get the classic title card, where we linger for a little too long, but if that's what we have to sacrifice for the mind-blowing saga coming up, I think that's well worth the trade-off. As the logo leaves, we get a glimpse of Deku flying through the air with his hood on, and Gran Torino's cape flowing in the wind. I just have to say that the costume in motion is so awesome. His recent designs have all been pretty good, but I really do just love this one. A quick few shots of his classmates later, and we get a nice zoom in on Uraraka, who will play a significant part later on in this arc. Though there isn't anything particularly significant about these shots themselves, the looks on their faces, the rain, and the destruction in the background all come together to really reinforce the darker and more somber tone I mentioned earlier. We then get a first look at a new character in this arc, well, once again, saved for the manga section of this video. But for now, I'll just say she looks great, and that's exactly how I pictured her. Very excited for her debut. Cut to a shot of Deku sitting on top of a bus and sticking straight up out the ground. Uraraka walks over and reaches her hand out to Deku, once again pointing to her significance later in this arc. Not much to say about this shot itself. Now we get to the good part. We see Deku swinging around the city like Spider-Man, and this incredible cut of Deku flying through the window of a building and out the other side. The use of his new signature green and yellow is breathtaking, alongside the phenomenal fast-paced animation scene ripped straight from the manga, cutting quickly into another shot of this new character, with her purple hair perfectly complementing the coloring. Moving on, we get this eerie-looking black and white shot of what looks like Shigaraki's father, Kotaro Shimura, forming out from the floor and screaming. All I can say for now is it looks both horrifying and stunning at the same time. The white eyes with no pupils really sell the creepy feeling. Immediately following whatever that was, we get this awesome shot of Deku standing up and unleashing One For All's power in a lightning surge around him. The camera spinning around him with outstretched arms is really impressive in 2D animation. Love it. Speaking of outstretched arms, Ida's literally just T-posing into this fight. To his left and right, we see Bakugo and Todoroki both speeding forward towards Shigaraki. While they're all speeding around him in circles, Ida the GOAT trips up Shigaraki to set up the other two to use howitzer impact and a ranged fire attack against him. Shiggy puts his arms up to defend against the blasts as we cut to our next scene. This cut doesn't really relate to anything in this arc, but it's really cool nonetheless. As the camera rotates around Deku, we can see each color of One For All circle him, each leaving a very brief after image of his body until they all converge and he blazes forward with incredible speed. The colors, of course, represent the individual wielders of One For All, and their convergence on Deku show them throwing their weight, power, and trust behind him to propel him forward. We've seen this concept several times throughout the show and the movies, so it's a nice addition to the opening. As we near the end of the opening, we get a straight-on shot of Deku's mask in detail, finally. With the dark eyes, the torn-up cloth, and the cracked metal, he looks really terrifying. Looking at him, you'd never guess he's a hero. The dark eyes with only pupils visible is reminiscent of All Might, but somehow gives off the opposite vibe. Just as quick as it appears though, Deku's mask gets blown off, and behind it is our Deku revealed with tears in his eyes. Keeping with the theme of this opening, it looks like whatever's in store for him is much more depressing and darker than the series thus far. Before we get to this last scene, I just wanted to give a quick refresher on how the first half of Season 6 ended. When Shigaraki tried to steal One for All from Deku, they entered the Quark Realm area thing. Look, I can't figure out exactly what this place is called, okay? Just chill. It's clear that All for One is trying to steal Shigaraki's body, and Shigaraki doesn't really appreciate that, so in the finale, Deku says this.
大勢殺した。みんなを傷つけた。許せるはずがない。けれど、あの時、オルフォーワンに飲まれたお前が、あの時、お前の顔が助けを求めたように見えた。
Deku has always had the heart of a hero, and even after everything Shigaraki has done, he still wants to be the hero that saves everyone. Back to the opening, we see a powered-up Tomura Shigaraki getting blown away with little Tenko Shimura appearing from within. Looking closely at Shigaraki's face, in the exact frame that Tenko appears, Shigaraki's face morphs into All for One, showing that even with how terrible he has become, All for One was the architect of his fall. Shigaraki might be a villain, but even villains need saving sometimes. More literally, Shigaraki is trapped inside of a body that is being slowly commandeered by All for One, something which Deku realizes is a fate that even Shigaraki deserves to be saved from. Tenko stumbles and falls as he emerges from All for One's clutches, and Deku bends down, reaching out a hand to offer his help. Behind his hand, a star appears, representing One for All. The light could represent a few things, but I'll leave that up to your interpretation. We finish with a group photo of Class 1A behind Deku as the sun emerges from behind the clouds. Deku lifts up his arm in classic All Might fashion, with the sun right above as we freeze on everyone moving forward with Deku leading the pack into the broken world as heroes. Animation-wise, this whole thing has Nakamura written all over it. He has previously done quite a bit of work for the series, but dare I say this is his best contribution yet? I wish I had the full list of credits to shout out all those who made this masterpiece, but for now, that's all I can say. Now, I want to go over a couple manga references, both hidden and not so hidden in this opening, but if you're not caught up, don't go anywhere. Check the chapters on this video or this time code right here, and skip to the wrap-up and my thoughts at the end of the video. Are they gone? Last chance before I talk manga spoilers. Alright, let's go. Starting from the top, we get an amazing recreation of the final panel of Chapter 306 when Deku decides to leave UA. As said so far, the darker tone of this opening is doing a really good job of setting the stage for the coming collapse of Hero Society, especially with the background art of all the destruction and debris. The image of All Might behind Deku is not just cool, but also hints at their relationship in this arc. Specifically, it probably references when Deku leaves All Might behind during his Dark Deku era. I'm still mad he didn't take that lunch. The shots of Class 1A looking sad in the rain, similarly, aren't just a way to show off the classmates. In the manga, when the class finally finds Deku at the All Might statue in Chapter 318, it also happens to be raining. I really like this little detail of them searching for Deku in the rain, since we didn't really get any of that in the manga, and filling in that gap, even if only in the opening, is really nice. And now, the lovely Lady Nagant is finally here in motion. She sits atop a building, which of course is where she spends most of her time in the story. Jumping ahead in the manga, this scene of Uraraka lending a hand to Deku is probably in reference to Chapter 324, where she defends him from the angry mob of people who are afraid he will lead Shigaraki right to them at the UA shelter in his search of One for All. We now have a really great adaptation of the Nagant versus Deku fight, complete with even possibly an allusion to the fake out with Nagant shooting a reflection of Deku. Maybe a bit of a stretch, but it still looks great, so moving on. I sort of glossed over this in the anime-only discussion because this part of Kotaro Shimura doesn't really fit into this arc, but the first thing I thought of when I saw it was Shigaraki's optimal form from Chapter 365 and 366. Specifically, this panel from the end of 365 when his family crows from his body. This won't get adapted this season, so it could just be a metaphor for Shigaraki, Tenko, and Kotaro's relationship in some way, but this was the first thing that came to mind. Skipping forward, this cut in the opening got me more hyped than any other. Here we see Deku speeding forward with the third quirk, Fajin. With its first appearance in Chapter 315, we will for sure see this power this season with Foe 100%, and I am so ready for it. To add more detail to the Deku behind the mask here, his teary look behind the scary mask of course shows how Deku may be the strong, scary vigilante on the outside during this arc, but leaving behind his friends and going out on his own really does hurt him. Similar analysis goes to the Tenko Shigaraki emergence, where the Shigaraki we see could represent the whole new person that he becomes with All For One at the helm during the final arc. We know the real Shigaraki is still in there though, and Tenko illustrates that in this opening. When Tenko gets up, we see a nice shot of the ocean with the sun behind when Deku reaches his hand out. It might just be me, but the first thing that I thought of when it came to that shot was Star and Stripe flying in on her bombers. In the last cut, when we saw Shigaraki, he was also sporting his signature long hair from that arc as well. I don't think we'll see the Star and Stripe arc in full this season, but I do think we'll at least get a glimpse of it at the very end. Finally, the last few shots of the class here are a nice wrap-up for both the opening and the season, with Deku reunited with his classmates after the battle at the All Might statue. That's all the manga references I could find, but if you caught any, please leave them in the comments below. Just please remember to mark them as spoiler. I want to keep all the anime onlys unspoiled for what's to come. Okay, everyone back? Awesome. Did you learn anything new from this analysis? If you did, please let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, maybe leave a like and sub too. Overall, this opening is probably the best one yet. The animation is also wonderfully clean, especially in the action scenes. The camera shots are just S tier. We've had 2 back-to-back bangers in both music choice and animation direction. This opening in particular really kills it, both in setting the tone for the rest of the season, as well as hiding many manga references and hints to the future. The animation for Season 4 and 5's opening may have been a bit disappointing, but Season 6 has really turned that around. If all it takes is a bit of Fortnite money, can we get another collab before next season?